In Glasgow, luxury means something different. For the thousands who sleep on cold pavement, a cardboard box is a mattress, a street corner is a bedroom, and a thin blanket, if they're lucky, is the closest thing to comfort they'll ever know. No roof, no bed, no safety, just the open sky where survival isn't guaranteed. Welcome to Globe Path Travel Documentary, where reality isn't just explored, it's exposed. No bed, no home, no way out. Thousands sleep on Glasgow's cold, wet pavement every night, wrapped in nothing but a thin blanket, if they're lucky. A cardboard box is their mattress, a street corner, their bedroom. And while the city thrives, they suffer, ignored, invisible, forgotten. This is the reality Glasgow doesn't want you to see. And tonight, we're exposing the truth. If you're ready for the raw, the real, the unforgiving, hit subscribe now, because after this, you won't be able to look away. The hidden struggle. Homelessness in Glasgow. Glasgow's homelessness crisis in 2025 has escalated beyond a social issue. It is now a full-scale humanitarian emergency. The city's infrastructure is buckling under the weight of record-breaking homelessness, with over 32,272 open applications for housing assistance, a number that has shattered previous records. The situation is so dire that 3,500 social housing flats have been allocated to homeless individuals in an attempt to ease the crisis. Yet demand continues to outstrip supply at an alarming rate. Families are being forced into overcrowded living conditions, with reports of 7 people crammed into 2-bedroom flats, waiting indefinitely for permanent housing. The government's response has been sluggish, with officials admitting that progress on addressing homelessness has been classified as red, indicating major failures in policy execution. The crisis is particularly devastating for refugees and asylum seekers, who now make up a staggering 38% increase in homelessness cases. Glasgow has historically been a welcoming city for asylum seekers, but the strain on resources has reached an unsustainable level. The city currently houses 95% of Scotland's asylum seekers, while the remaining 5% are dispersed across 17 other local authorities. This imbalance has placed immense financial pressure on Glasgow's homelessness services, with the city spending £26.5 million in the past year alone to accommodate displaced individuals. The UK Home Office provides only £750 per asylum seeker per year, leaving Glasgow to cover the remaining costs, forcing the council to dig into reserves to the tune of £11 million. Meanwhile, homeless charities are struggling to survive, with Scotland's only night shelter facing closure due to a legal battle with Glasgow City Council. The shelter, located on Glassford Street, has been blocked from operating due to public safety concerns, despite the fact that beds are at a premium and demand has never been higher. Other charities are also facing severe funding shortages, as council budgets are being squeezed, limiting their ability to provide essential services. Glasgow's homelessness crisis is no longer just about poverty. It is about government neglect, systemic failure, and a city unable to cope with the sheer scale of human suffering. The question is no longer how bad the crisis is. It is how much worse it must get before real action is taken. The city has declared a housing emergency, but without urgent intervention, thousands will remain trapped in a cycle of desperation, displacement, and death. Glasgow is broken, and unless drastic measures are taken, this crisis will only deepen. The faces of homelessness. Who are the people behind the statistics? Homelessness in Glasgow is not just about lacking a roof. It is about survival in brutal conditions, where every night is a battle against the cold, hunger, and the indifference of society. The streets of Glasgow have become makeshift homes for thousands, with doorways, alleyways, and underpasses serving as bedrooms for those who have nowhere else to go. Many homeless individuals sleep directly on the pavement, using cardboard boxes as insulation against the freezing temperatures. Others huddle under bridges, seeking shelter from the relentless wind and rain, while some find refuge in abandoned buildings, risking injury or arrest just to escape the elements. Food is another daily struggle. With no kitchen, no money, and no stability, homeless individuals rely on charity-run soup kitchens, food banks, and donations to survive. Organizations like Homeless Project Scotland operate night shelters and soup kitchens, providing hot meals from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. every day. However, demand far exceeds supply, and many go hungry. Some individuals scavenge for food in bins, while others rely on handouts from passers-by, hoping for a moment of kindness in a city that often looks the other way. The crisis has reached a point where Glasgow's only night shelter is facing closure, despite having helped over 8,000 people since January. The shelter provides emergency beds, but with record-breaking homelessness, there simply aren't enough spaces. The government's failure to address the crisis has left thousands trapped in a cycle of hunger, exposure, and desperation, with no clear path to stability. For many, survival is a daily gamble, a fight against the elements, against starvation, and against a system that has abandoned them. Glasgow's homeless aren't just statistics. They are human beings, struggling to stay alive in a city that has forgotten them. Homelessness in Glasgow is not just about lacking a roof. It is about survival in brutal conditions, where every night is a battle against the cold, hunger, and the indifference of society. The streets of Glasgow have become makeshift homes for thousands, with doorways, alleyways, and underpasses serving as bedrooms for those who have nowhere else to go. Many homeless individuals sleep directly on the pavement, using cardboard boxes as insulation against the freezing temperatures. Others huddle under bridges, seeking shelter from the relentless wind and rain, while some find refuge in abandoned buildings, risking injury or arrest just to escape the elements. Food is another daily struggle. With no kitchen, no money, and no stability, homeless individuals rely on charity-run soup kitchens, food banks, and donations to survive. Organizations like Homeless Project Scotland operate night shelters and soup kitchens, providing hot meals from 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. every day. However, demand far exceeds supply, and many go hungry. Some individuals scavenge for food in bins, while others rely on handouts from passers-by, hoping for a moment of kindness in a city that often looks the other way. The crisis has reached a point where Glasgow's only night shelter is facing closure, despite having helped over 8,000 people since January. The shelter provides emergency beds, but with record-breaking homelessness, there simply aren't enough spaces. The government's failure to address the crisis has left thousands trapped in a cycle of hunger, exposure, and desperation, with no clear path to stability. For many, survival is a daily gamble, a fight against the elements, against starvation, and against a system that has abandoned them. Glasgow's homeless aren't just statistics. They are human beings, struggling to stay alive in a city that has forgotten them. The organizations making a difference. In the midst of Glasgow's homelessness crisis, where thousands sleep on cold pavement and families remain trapped in overcrowded shelters, a handful of organizations continue to fight against the odds. These groups, ranging from long-established charities to grassroots movements, are the only lifeline for those abandoned by the system. Despite record-breaking homelessness, severe funding shortages, and government inaction, these organizations refuse to give up. But the question remains, is their work enough, or are they merely patching bullet wounds with Band-Aids? One of the most impactful organizations is Glasgow City Mission, which has been serving the city's most vulnerable since 1826. This mission provides hot meals, emergency shelter, and addiction recovery programs, offering a safe space for those who have nowhere else to turn. Their work is critical, yet they struggle with overwhelming demand as the number of homeless individuals continues to rise. Another key player is the Halliday Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping Glasgow's homeless population survive the brutal conditions of street life. Volunteers distribute food, clothing, and hygiene products, ensuring that those living on the streets have access to basic necessities. However, funding remains a major challenge, limiting their ability to expand services. Glasgow, the caring city, focuses on providing long-term solutions, working to prevent homelessness rather than just treating its symptoms. Their programs include housing assistance, employment training, and mental health support, aiming to break the cycle of homelessness rather than just offering temporary relief. Meanwhile, Right There, formerly Why People, has been on the front lines of Glasgow's homelessness crisis for over 200 years. Their work includes street outreach, emergency housing, and family reunification programs, ensuring that people don't just receive shelter, but also the support needed to rebuild their lives. Despite their efforts, the cost of living crisis and housing emergency have made their work harder than ever, with demand far exceeding available resources. Beyond these established charities, grassroots movements are rising, demanding policy changes and government accountability. Homeless Network Scotland has launched the All In for Glasgow initiative, which aims to restructure homelessness services and push for systemic reform. Their work focuses on street outreach, drop-in support centers, and housing-first programs, ensuring that people receive long-term solutions rather than temporary fixes. Despite these efforts, the scale of the crisis continues to grow, leaving many to wonder. Are these organizations truly solving homelessness, or are they simply delaying the inevitable? With record-breaking homelessness, shelters overflowing, and government policies failing, the fight against homelessness in Glasgow is far from over. These organizations are doing everything they can, but without major systemic change, their work may never be enough. Glasgow's homeless don't need temporary relief, they need permanent solutions. And until the government steps up, these organizations remain the only hope for thousands of people struggling to survive. What can you do to help? The homelessness crisis in Glasgow is not just a local issue. It is a global failure, a stark reminder of how modern societies continue to neglect their most vulnerable. While government policies struggle to keep up with the growing demand for housing and social services, ordinary people have the power to make a difference. The question is no longer who is responsible, it is who is willing to act. One of the most immediate ways to help is through donations to shelters and food banks. Organizations like Glasgow City Mission, the Halliday Foundation, and Homeless Project Scotland rely on public support to provide hot meals, emergency beds, and essential supplies to those living on the streets. Many shelters are overcrowded and underfunded, struggling to meet the needs of a growing homeless population. A single donation, whether it's money, food, clothing, or hygiene products, can mean the difference between survival and suffering for someone in need. Beyond donations, volunteering is one of the most impactful ways to create change. Even a few hours spent serving meals, distributing supplies, or offering emotional support can transform lives. Many homeless individuals suffer from isolation and neglect, and simply being seen, heard, and treated with dignity can restore a sense of hope. Organizations like Homeless Network Scotland run street outreach programs, ensuring that those sleeping rough receive medical care, addiction recovery support, and guidance toward housing solutions. Volunteers play a critical role in these efforts, bridging the gap between government services and real human connection. Perhaps the most powerful tool for change is raising awareness. Homelessness thrives in silence and invisibility. When people look away, when governments delay action, when society pretends the problem doesn't exist. Sharing stories, demanding action, and holding officials accountable forces the issue into the spotlight. Social media campaigns, petitions, and public demonstrations have led to policy changes, increased funding, and new housing initiatives in cities around the world. Glasgow's homelessness crisis will not improve unless people demand solutions, and that starts with breaking the silence. The reality is harsh. Homelessness will not disappear overnight, but every act of kindness, every donation, every volunteer effort, and every voice raised in protest pushes the world closer to change. Glasgow is broken, but it doesn't have to stay that way. The question is, will you be part of the solution? The impact of tourism on homelessness in Glasgow. Glasgow is a city of stark contrasts where historic landmarks, thriving nightlife, and luxury hotels attract millions of tourists each year. Yet just steps away, thousands of homeless individuals struggle to survive. The tourism industry pumps billions into the local economy, but the benefits rarely extend to those living on the streets. Instead, homelessness continues to rise, creating a divide between wealth and suffering, between celebration and neglect. The city's tourism sector is booming, with visitors spending over £2.5 billion annually on accommodations, restaurants, and attractions. Glasgow's hospitality industry thrives, yet the number of people sleeping rough has skyrocketed by 22% in the past year alone. While tourists enjoy five-star hotels, many homeless individuals sleep in doorways just outside these establishments, ignored by those passing by. The contrast is jarring. A city that prides itself on its cultural heritage, yet fails to protect its most vulnerable residents. Government spending on homelessness has reached £120 million over the past 5 years, much of it allocated to temporary housing in private hotels and hostels. While this may seem like a solution, it has created a bottleneck effect, where individuals remain stuck in temporary accommodation for months, sometimes years, without a clear path to permanent housing. The city's social housing shortage has forced thousands into unstable living conditions, while tourism-driven development continues to prioritize luxury accommodations over affordable housing. Tourism also impacts the visibility of homelessness. During major events and peak seasons, authorities often increase efforts to remove homeless individuals from tourist-heavy areas, creating the illusion of a clean, thriving city while pushing the crisis further into the shadows. This practice, known as hostile architecture, includes bench designs that prevent sleeping, spikes installed in doorways, and increased police presence to discourage rough sleeping. Instead of addressing the root causes of homelessness, the city hides the problem, ensuring that visitors see only Glasgow's beauty, not its decay. The question remains, are we celebrating Glasgow's success while ignoring its suffering? Tourism fuels the economy, but at what cost? Until the city prioritizes real solutions, affordable housing, mental health support, and sustainable policies, homelessness will continue to rise, overshadowed by the bright lights of Glasgow's tourist attractions. The role of government and policy in solving homelessness. Glasgow's homelessness crisis has reached catastrophic levels, and despite government promises, real solutions remain elusive. The city has declared a housing emergency, yet thousands remain stranded in overcrowded shelters, temporary accommodations, and the streets, with no clear path to stability. The government's response has been slow, fragmented, and largely ineffective, leaving many to wonder, are these policies designed to solve homelessness or simply to manage its visibility? One of the biggest failures has been housing initiatives. While Glasgow has committed to expanding social housing, the reality is far bleaker. The city has allocated 3,500 flats for homeless individuals, but demand far exceeds supply, leaving thousands stuck in limbo. The Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan, introduced to move people into permanent housing faster, has fallen short, with waiting lists stretching for months, even years. Many families remain trapped in temporary accommodations where conditions are unstable, overcrowded, and unsafe. Financial aid is another major shortcoming. The government provides limited financial assistance, but it is barely enough to cover survival costs. Homeless individuals receive £750 per year from the UK Home Office, an amount that does little to secure stable housing or long-term recovery. Glasgow City Council has been forced to cover the remaining costs, spending £26.5 million in the past year alone to accommodate displaced individuals. However, with budget cuts and rising demand, the city is struggling to keep up, leading to service reductions and funding shortages. Policy changes have also stalled despite urgent calls for reform. The Ending Homelessness Together Action Plan, introduced by the Scottish Government, was meant to transform homelessness services, yet progress has been slow. The city's Integration Joint Board, which directs health and social care services, faces a £42.5 million deficit, forcing job cuts and service reductions. Meanwhile, homelessness has skyrocketed by 22% in Glasgow alone, proving that current policies are failing to address the root causes of the crisis. The government's approach to homelessness has been reactive rather than proactive, focusing on short-term fixes rather than long-term solutions. Instead of investing in permanent housing, mental health support, and employment programs, resources are being poured into temporary accommodations that do little to break the cycle of homelessness. Glasgow's homeless population doesn't need band-aid solutions. They need structural change, immediate action, and real investment in their futures. The question remains, how much worse does this crisis have to get before the government takes real action? Glasgow is broken, and unless drastic measures are taken, this humanitarian disaster will only deepen. Homelessness in Glasgow is not just a crisis. It is a humanitarian failure, a brutal indictment of a system that has abandoned its most vulnerable. Every statistic represents a shattered life, a person who once had dreams, ambitions, and stability, but was ultimately discarded by society. The numbers tell a grim story. Over 32,272 open homelessness applications, 16,634 households trapped in temporary accommodation, and 10,360 children growing up in unstable conditions. But behind each figure is a human being, struggling to survive in a city that has turned its back on them. For those living on the streets, dignity is a luxury they can no longer afford. They sleep on cold concrete, wrapped in thin blankets that barely shield them from the freezing night air. Their meals come from charity-run soup kitchens if they're lucky. Otherwise, they scavenge for food in bins, hoping to find something edible. The city moves around them, indifferent to their suffering. Tourists take photos of Glasgow's historic landmarks. Business executives rush to meetings, and shoppers fill the streets. While just inches away, a homeless man breathes his last breath, unnoticed, forgotten. Every ignored plea is a death sentence. Homelessness is not just about lacking a roof. It is about being invisible, about screaming for help in a world that refuses to listen. The government promises solutions, yet housing initiatives fail, leaving thousands stranded. Financial aid is inadequate, barely covering survival costs. Policy changes stall, while homelessness skyrockets by 22% in Glasgow alone. The city has declared a housing emergency. But what does that mean for the people still sleeping rough tonight? Every moment of inaction is another life lost. Glasgow is broken, but we cannot just watch it burn. The question is no longer how bad the crisis is. It is how much worse it must get before we finally stop ignoring it. Homelessness is not just about poverty, it is about human dignity. And until we recognize that, the suffering will continue. Globe Path Travel Documentary presents Glasgow is Broken, Filth, Drugs, and Forgotten Lives. Homelessness isn't just about poverty, it's about human dignity. Every statistic is a shattered life. Every ignored plea is a death sentence. Every moment of inaction is another life lost. Glasgow is broken, but we can't just watch it burn. We're exposing the truth the world refuses to see. If you want raw, unfiltered reality, hit subscribe now, because after this, you won't be able to look away. Subscribe to Globe Path Travel Documentary today.